From unsolved mysteries to unexplained phenomena, from comedy gold to relationship fails, Amazon Music's got the most ad-free top podcasts, included with Prime. Because the only thing that should interrupt your listening is, well, nothing. Download the Amazon Music app today.
All right, so get this. We're diving into some pretty intense online comments today, folks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we got a whole stack from a popular forum, and they're all responding to a news article.
Okay.
And get this, the title of the article is Do Something, Damn It.
Wow. Okay, right to the point.
It is. It says, Tim Walsh says Democrats need to answer Americans' primal scream.
Interesting.
So that's what we're trying to figure out, like, what is this primal scream? What are people so fired up about?
Yeah.
And what does it tell us about how they see the Democrats right now? You know?
I think that's a really fascinating question. And it's interesting how this particular article seems to have, like, struck a nerve.
Yeah.
There's definitely a sense of urgency in a lot of these comments, even, like, desperation in some cases.
Oh, wow.
It seems like people are really disillusioned with the Democratic Party, feeling like no one's listening to them.
Yeah, like their concerns are just going nowhere. Yeah. I think Tim Walsh's call to action really sets the tone right. Like, he's urging Democrats to step up and actually deliver for the American people.
Right.
But it's the comments that really paint the picture, you know?
Yeah.
There's so much frustration with what a lot of people see as inaction, especially when you compare it to, like, the Republicans who seem to be, you know, gaining ground.
Yeah, and it's not just about disagreeing on policy either, right? It's deeper than that.
Yeah.
Many commenters feel like the Democratic leadership is just out of touch.
Right.
Like, they're more focused on protecting the status quo and appeasing corporations than actually fighting for the needs of everyday people.
Yeah, there's that perception that they're more interested in, like you said, keeping things as they are than actually making any real changes.
Exactly. And there's this recurring criticism that the leadership is old, outclassed, and out of touch.
Oh, yeah. That comes up a lot.
And it really points to a disconnect between the party elite and the people they're supposed to represent.
Yeah. So they're frustrated, but are they offering any solutions, or is it just venting?
It's a mix of both, I'd say.
Okay.
There's definitely a lot of venting going on, but there are some common themes that emerge.
Okay. What kind of themes?
Well, for example, Chuck Schumer's name comes up quite a bit.
Yeah.
People criticizing what they see as weak leadership
Yeah.
and a tendency to, like, compromise with Republicans.
Right.
Even when it means sacrificing key Democratic priorities.
Yeah. You know, speaking of Schumer compromising, there's one comment that really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
It said, nobody is going to convince me that Senate Dems didn't get together and decide who's going to vote for the CR.
Okay.
So the rest of them could say they stood against this while the others take the fall. It suggested this was all like a calculated move.
Wow.
You know, with those expected to retire or not facing re-election taking the hit.
Interesting.
Is that a common sentiment? This idea that the Democratic leadership is basically playing politics instead of representing their constituents?
Yeah. It's a pretty cynical take, but it does reflect a level of distrust that many commenters seem to have.
Right.
They see these moves as strategic maneuvering,
Right.
prioritizing political gain over genuine representation.
And it seems like this distrust is fueled, at least in part, by concerns about the role of money in politics.
Definitely.
A lot of these comments talk about how corporate donations are basically dictating political decisions,
Yeah.
with Democrats being beholden to wealthy donors and unable to truly represent the needs of working-class Americans.
Right. And the Citizens United ruling comes up a lot here.
Yeah.
For those who might not remember, that ruling essentially allowed corporations to spend unlimited amounts of money on elections.
Okay.
And many see that as a turning point.
Yeah.
It gave corporations even more power to influence political outcomes.
Right. There's a comment that sums it up pretty well.
Yeah.
It says, Democrats have to walk a tricky line between appealing to the left while trying not to lose the support of the wealthy. It's like they're trapped between a rock and a hard place.
It's a tough spot, for sure.
But even within all this negativity, there are glimpses of hope.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Some commenters point to Bernie Sanders and his success with small-dollar donations as proof that you can run a competitive campaign without relying heavily on big corporations.
That's a good point.
But even those comments seem tinged with resignation.
Yeah.
Like they're acknowledging the exception rather than the rule.
Right.
It's like, yeah, Bernie did it, but can anyone else?
Right.
I'm curious, though, did any comments offer any alternative solutions to this whole corporate money problem?
Some people call for campaign finance reform.
Okay.
Others advocate for stricter regulations on lobbying. And there's even talk about the need for a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United.
Wow.
But there's also a sense that these solutions are a long shot,
Right.
given the current political climate.
So we've got frustration with leadership distrust in the system and concerns about money in politics. Where do we go from here?
Well, there's a fascinating comparison that some commenters draw between the political situations in the US and the UK.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it seems they're looking across the pond for both warnings and potential lessons.
That is interesting. Can you give us an example of what you're saying?
One comment that stood out said, "This whole thing has already played out in the UK.
Okay.
Boomers elected the right wing. The right wing spent 15 years trashing the country.
Oh, wow.
No one learned a thing in the whole process, and the idiots that are the electorate are still voting to be poor while the rich get richer."
Wow. That's pretty bleak, is the commenter suggesting that the U.S. is headed down the same path.
It seems like a cautionary tale, highlighting the potential consequences of inaction and the danger of complacency.
Right.
But within that same thread, there's pushback.
Oh, really?
Yeah, with some arguing that even the so-called left-leaning party in the UK is actually quite right-wing,
Oh, interesting.
adopting similar culture war tactics as their conservative counterparts.
So is this comparison more about highlighting the global rise of right-wing populism? Or is there something specific about the UK that resonates with these commenters?
It's likely a combination of both.
Okay.
But what's important is that these commenters are looking beyond U.S. borders,
Right.
seeking to understand the larger political trends and potential future scenarios.
Yeah, they're trying to see the bigger picture.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important theme, the desire for a new generation of leadership.
Okay, let's talk about that, because you're right, that comes up a lot in these comments.
Yeah.
People seem to be craving fresh ideas, a new approach, someone to shake things up.
But it's not just about age, is it? Like, there's this deeper yearning for leaders who are willing to fight, to stand up for what they believe in and actually challenge the powers that be.
Absolutely. And certain names keep popping up in this context, like AOC, for example.
Yeah.
She seems to embody that fighting spirit for a lot of these commenters.
Yeah, she's often mentioned as like the prime example of what this new generation could look like,
Right.
more progressive, more outspoken, unafraid to challenge the status quo.
Yeah, here's a comment that captures that sentiment.
Okay.
It says, "It can't be pure coincidence that all throughout history, most revolutionary leaders are young.
Interesting.
Not all old representatives are bad, and not all young representatives are good, but history constantly teaches us that fresh ideas do not come from old guard." Like there's a real hunger for that kind of energy and fresh thinking.
Right. And it's not just AOC there. Jasmine Crockett is another name that comes up.
Oh, yeah, she's been making waves.
Yeah. Often alongside AOC, it seems like people are looking for figures who represent a break from the perceived complacency and caution of the establishment.
Yeah, like they want someone who's not afraid to shake things up a little.
Exactly.
But it's interesting, though, because alongside these calls for a new generation, you also see Bernie Sanders mentioned. And, well, let's be honest, he's not exactly part of the younger generation.
True. That's a good point.
But what's fascinating is that age seems less important than mindset.
Right.
Like, people acknowledge that Sanders, despite his age, has consistently pushed for progressive policies, challenging the establishment even when it wasn't popular within the Democratic Party itself.
He's definitely been a consistent voice.
So it's less about a specific age and more about a willingness to fight for what you believe in, even if it means ruffling some feathers within your own party.
Exactly. It's about a certain fearlessness that people seem to crave in their leaders.
Right, and this kind of ties into another major theme. We're seeing the call for a third party.
Yes, the third party solution that comes up a lot in these comments.
It really does. There's this deep dissatisfaction with the current two-party system.
Yeah.
A lot of people feel like it's no longer serving them, that both parties are ultimately beholden to the same corporate interests.
Yeah, like they're two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. And there's one comment that I think really gets to the heart of it.
What's that?
It says, "Please, for the love of what I thought, America was time for a legit third party."
Wow. Yeah, that's a powerful statement.
It's almost a plea,
Yeah.
born out of this feeling of being trapped within a system that's no longer responsive to their needs.
Right. And there are some really specific frustrations fueling this desire for a third party.
Yeah, like what?
Well, for example, we see comments lamenting the influence of corporate money, arguing that both parties are essentially puppets for wealthy donors.
You know, speaking of corporate influence earlier, we touched upon how some comments expressed cynicism about Democrats being beholden to wealthy donors.
Right.
Were there any comments that, like, dug a bit deeper into that cynicism?
Oh, absolutely. One commenter wrote, corporations are rich enough they can just contribute to both sides and effectively always come out on top.
Wow.
It really gets to the heart of that feeling of powerlessness that many people seem to be experiencing.
Yeah, it's like that classic heads I win, tails you lose scenario, but applied to politics.
Yeah. Exact. No matter who wins the election, the corporations always come out on top.
Right. And this feeling is amplified by comments that highlight the perceived conflicts of interest among politicians who rely on these huge donations from corporations.
Yeah, one commenter put it pretty bluntly. Many of them represent the same corporations they claim to oppose.
Ouch. Yeah, it's that hypocrisy that really stings, you know? That feeling that they're saying one thing but doing another, all while lining their own pockets.
It definitely erodes trust.
Yeah.
And feeds into that sense that the system is rigged against everyday people.
But even with all this negativity surrounding the two-party system, are people actually hopeful about a third party emerging?
It's a mixed bag for sure.
Okay.
There's definitely a sense of longing for a viable alternative.
Yeah.
But there's also a recognition of the practical challenges.
Yeah. Like what kind of challenges?
Well, the U.S. electoral system makes it really difficult for third parties to gain traction. There's the issue of getting on the ballot in all 50 states, the lack of media coverage compared to the two major parties.
Yeah, they're constantly fighting an uphill battle.
And then there's the fear of splitting the vote and inadvertently helping the opposition.
Right. So even those who crave a third party are somewhat resigned to the reality that it's a long shot, at least for now.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that this idea keeps coming up. It speaks to a deep desire for change, even if people aren't sure what that change would look like or how to achieve it.
I think that's a really important point.
What other avenues for change are people discussing?
Well, there's a thread running through these comments that I find particularly thought-provoking.
Okay.
The lack of widespread protests and social movements.
You mean people are surprised that there haven't been more mass demonstrations in response to, like, the current political climate?
Exactly. Some commenters express disappointment, even frustration that there hasn't been a more forceful public response to the perceived threats to democracy and the erosion of civil liberties.
I remember one comment that was like, where has Antifa been in all this? Or was it all a psyop?
Yeah, that question itself is really revealing.
Yeah.
It highlights the tendency to view Antifa as this like monolithic, organized group, when in reality it's a decentralized movement without a clear hierarchy or leadership structure.
Yeah, and that term psyop, short for psychological operation, is often used to suggest that these movements are orchestrated by some hidden force, you know?
Yeah, for manipulative purposes.
Right. But that comment got a pretty powerful response, though, didn't it?
Yes, someone replied with, in our community, activists are primarily focused on helping everyone at the local level to the extent possible.
Okay.
We were abandoned by the federal government, so we need to use our abilities to take care of each other where it can make the biggest impact.
Powerful stuff.
It really highlights the limitations of waiting for a specific group or organization to take action.
Yeah.
And emphasizes the importance of grassroots efforts and community-based solutions.
It's a good reminder that activism can take many forms, you know, and that impactful change often starts at the local level, within communities, and through networks of mutual aid.
And there's a sense that this type of community-based activism might be more sustainable and ultimately more effective than relying on large-scale protests or national organizations to lead the charge.
So even amidst the disappointment and the longing for a third party, there's a recognition that real change often starts at the grassroots level by empowering communities and building solidarity from the ground up.
Exactly. And this brings us back to Tim Walz and the reason his initial call to action resonated so deeply with these commenters. He's seen by many as someone who understands those everyday struggles, who connects with people on an emotional level, and who's not afraid to challenge the status quo.
Yeah, he's not afraid to ruffle some feathers.
Exactly. He represents a different kind of leadership, one that many feel is missing in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of admiration for Walz in these comments, even among those who are highly critical of the Democratic Party as a whole.
Right, so they see him as a bright spot.
Yeah, and one comment that stood out to me said, Tim Walz is absolutely right on.
Okay.
Any Democrat who says otherwise should be perceived as a failure of leadership, and they should also be pressured to resign because we really are in for the fight of our lives and futures.
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty strong statement.
It is, and it speaks to the intensity of feeling that Walz seems to evoke.
Right.
There's this sense that he embodies that fighting spirit that a lot of people feel is lacking in the Democratic Party.
Exactly.
He's seen as someone who's willing to call out Republican hypocrisy, stand up for his principles, and connect with voters in a way that transcends policy debates.
It's about more than just the issues, you know?
It's about character. It's about values.
Exactly.
You mentioned this idea of Walz connecting with voters on an emotional level. What are some specific examples from the comments that showcase this? And how does it contrast with other Democratic leaders?
Well, there are a lot of comments praising Walz's authenticity, his willingness to speak plainly, and his ability to connect with people's lived experiences.
Yeah, like he gets it.
Exactly. For example, one commenter wrote, "Walz is the only one who actually seems to understand what regular people are going through."
Wow.
Another comment mentioned his willingness to hold town halls in Republican districts.
Oh, wow.
To actually engage with voters who might not agree with him,
That's pretty bold.
as evidence of his commitment to reaching across the aisle and building bridges.
It's interesting. It seems like this willingness to engage with those who hold different views is something that really resonates with people.
Yeah.
It's like they're yearning for a leader who can bridge those divides, who can find common ground and build consensus,
Right.
rather than just, preaching to the choir.
Exactly. And that's something that many feel is missing in the current political climate. There's a sense that too many politicians are more interested in scoring points and demonizing the opposition than in actually finding solutions to the problems facing the country.
Yeah, it's like they've lost sight of the bigger picture.
Exactly.
But amidst all this praise for Walz, there's also this undercurrent of disappointment.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
A feeling that he was somehow held back during his presidential campaign.
Oh, interesting.
That his message was watered down to appeal to moderate voters.
Nice.
Like they saw glimpses of his potential of a leader who could really inspire and mobilize voters. But that potential was somehow squandered.
That's a shame.
Right. And this ties back to the broader frustration with the Democratic establishment and their perceived unwillingness to embrace a more bold or progressive approach.
I see.
It's the constant tension,
Yeah.
between trying to appeal to a broad base of voters, including moderates and independents,
Right.
and staying true to the party's core principles and fighting for a progressive agenda.
It's a tough balancing act for sure.
So we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've explored the frustration, the disillusionment, the yearning for change, and the desire for a new kind of leadership. What does it all mean? What can we take away from these really passionate comments?
I think it's clear that there's a deep sense of unease among many Americans.
Yeah.
They feel like the system is rigged against them, that their voices aren't being heard,
Yeah.
and that the leaders they've elected are failing to address the challenges they face.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
And this unease is manifesting in a variety of ways. Calls for a third-party frustration with corporate influence, a yearning for leaders who are willing to fight for their interests.
Right. People are looking for solutions.
And while we're not here to offer solutions or tell anyone what to think,
Right.
I do think there's a valuable lesson in these comments, regardless of your political affiliation.
What's that?
It's a reminder that people are paying attention. They care deeply about the direction of the country, and they're hungry for leaders who will listen to their concerns and fight for their interests.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that the future of American politics depends on engaging with those concerns,
Right.
on bridging those divides, and on finding ways to restore faith in the democratic process.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and most importantly, keep the conversation going.